Hello again and welcome to an episode of Roshamjoe Paints. As always, my name is Joe and today I'm going to be looking at painting the Canoptek Wraith from the Necron lineup in the Sautekh Dynasty scheme. I'll be showing you the steps that I took to get it, battle ready, if you will. And if it looks like a good scheme to you and you like how it came out, then stick around till after the intro and we'll get started. So here we have the Canoptek Wraith Sprue. The models, you get 3 of these in the box, and each of them is pretty similar other than the bodies being posed in different manners. The weapon choices that you get are the particle caster versus the trans-dimensional beam. You can switch those two out without even having to magnetize, or you could magnetize them if you want, but those can be swapped pretty easily. However, the whip coils versus the vicious claws are glued into place much more vigorously. I'm sure someone out there could figure out how to either make a secondary arm so that you can replace it, or magnetize the connections so that you can pop them off and swap them. However, I am just going to pick one and glue it in place. Now, for me, the decision is easy. I've already painted 2 Canoptek Wraiths with the vicious claws, so I'm going to use the whip coils. And in a game situation, that would be pretty cool, because while it is the same stats, the 2 weapons are the same stats, with the whip coils you actually get an extra attack as your model is being removed from the table. So with reanimation protocols, you could then lose a model, make an attack, possibly do some damage, and then have the chance of bringing that model back until the unit is destroyed later on. The only problem is the Canoptek Wraiths don't actually have that reanimation protocol. So why would I then paint the whip coils? Well, that's because I've already painted 2 with vicious claws, and so I'm going to paint my 3rd with the whip coils. So figure it's just the right thing to do, just so I can get a little variation. So I'm going to cut all these apart, and then we are going to paint, or rather, I'm going to assemble them. I'm going to paint them eventually, don't worry. This isn't Roshamjoe Assembles, but I will assemble them, all the body pieces, clean up the mold lines, and have all fun doing that, and show you which assemblies I can put together and how that looks. So there are all the pieces that are required, cut off and glued together in their sub-assemblies. And sub-assemblies is kind of a generous term. Realistically, these are just cut off, and nothing is done to them other than being cleaned up. They have their little positioning pegs, so when they get put into the Wraith itself, it just kind of slides into place, and then you can angle it and glue it. The guns, this is the main piece that needs to glue under here, but I want to be able to paint the detail first. So first I will paint the detail of both the gun piece as well as the Wraith itself. And then in that, you see there's 3 slots. In that center slot is where that actually, these arms get glued into. And those pegs that are on the arms, let me move that. The pegs that are on the arms actually hold this. And then, of course, your selection of gun just kind of places in, or, like I said, if you feel like magnetizing it, magnetize it. So now, normally, or on my last 2, I end up gluing it together just like this. Oh, and then, sorry, real quick, you can see the whip coils here with their arms separate back here, simply because those 2 you can position whether it's stretched out a little bit more or less and whatnot. So I will paint all that stuff, and then it'll either like paint press into place where the paint holds it because of the tension, or I'll end up adding a little bit of super glue. So move all those things aside. Now normally, or rather for the last 2 that I painted, the Wraith I put together like this because it seemed like a good place to start. However, when I went back to paint things like the inside of the armor here, I couldn't really get it without also messing everything else up. And because you can see it, and knowing how I like to paint things, yeah, I need to figure out a better way to do that. So what I did instead was just don't glue it on. So now I can paint these separately, and they actually just there's alignment pegs here, so you can just kind of put them back. Well, what I'll do is I'll end up super gluing them back on once we're done, so it all goes back together kind of seamlessly. I have thought I might glue this whole piece together. However, I don't know if it's really that necessary, and I would hate to glue it together, you know, and then have it be kind of like hinging or something as I'm trying to put on and break it back apart. I'd rather just do it, then glue it, make a bump sticker out of that since it rhymes. Anyways, let me go put some base coat of Abaddon Black on, or Chaos Black that is, and I will return to get started. All right, so the Chaos Black primer is now complete. So we are going to use some Leadbelcher as a dry brush. Now the way to do a dry brush is to get some paint on your brush like this, and then get rid of most of it so that you barely have anything left on your brush. So that when you sweep just gently across the model, it just almost like you're dusting a very fine vase on a shelf or something along those lines. You want to just go back and forth and just let it hit the highest parts first, and you're not looking to actually, I mean, you almost don't want to paint the model, you know, you're just pretending that you're doing nothing to it, and you're just going over the top really lightly, and then you just keep going and keep going. Mix some more into your brush, again, not a very heavy coat, say medium dry brush, and eventually you start building up a coat that leaves the black of the Chaos Black in the recesses, and you can almost see that it has kind of an edge highlight look already starting to build up. So we're going to continue on and do the entire base of the model here, or a large body portion of the model. And then there are some pieces along each of the arms, as well as in the back. Most of this is going to be Caliban Green, but like in the centers here, you want to make sure you get the pieces that are going to be surrounding this orb. It might take a little while, but you do this circular motion back and forth each way. If you do end up, let's say, just like doing too heavy of a dry brush in here, and it kind of like floods the area with silver, and you no longer have that defined black in the recesses, then just fill the rest up normal layer with Leadbelcher, and then go back and use a wash of Nuln Oil, and you know, now you can either dry brush the Stormhost Silver later, or you can end up just looking at doing an edge highlight at that point of Stormhost Silver on all of the edges that you accidentally did. Depends on the overall area. I would say if you're dry brushing like an entire model like this, and you mess up on one portion, I would say don't bother. But if you are dry brushing in here and you mess up, it's only it's a limited area, so edge highlighting this entire area would be worth it versus going back and trying to edge highlight the entire model. Now, you can just edge highlight the entire model in general if you'd like to, because it would look fantastic. However, I think for me, the part that really stands out on the Necrons, aside from the silver, is more so all of the green and highlights of orbs and whatnot. So having a little bit of a messy and not the best metallic look is fine, especially since I think the overall idea too is that they came out of the ground and have been sleeping for millennia. So I'll forgive a little bit of dirt and scuffed paint on them. All right, I wasn't watching if that was on focus at all. Hopefully it was, and if it wasn't, well then, to the couple of people who actually watch this, they can tell me to get my act together. How about that? All right, let's finish all the dry brush and we shall return. All right, the coat of Leadbelcher is done. I made sure to get the pieces that are back here that I was talking about that are going to be completely covered up, so that I can feel good about myself. Now I'm going to go back with a coat of Runefang Steel or Stormhost Silver, whichever one you got, and do a very light dry brush over all the blurry joints. Hey, there it is. Over all these joints here, on the tops and on the bottoms as well. The back of the head, basically anywhere you just did the other one, we're going to go and do again, this time just using a a lighter touch because you only want to get a little bit of the brighter silver on the edges if you can. If you get a little bit extra, that is fine. It's not it's not a huge problem. So like, here, just drag them one direction and try to just get like just the backs of the fins at this point. I don't know if you can see that's brightening them up or not. Hopefully you can. It just all looks like a giant blur. Back down this way. And again, we got barely any paint on the brush, and very light strokes. It'll feel like you're doing this forever, but the paint is slowly building up, and the majority of the paint is building up on those hard edges. So we want to do this because if you do too much at once, then you will end up with, well, again, if you end up doing it too much, that's fine. All you have to do is put your hand in paint. All you got to do at that point is go back, do a full layer of Leadbelcher, and then wash it with either Agric Earthshade or Nuln Oil, something along those lines. And then at that point, you can do a dry brush again if you want, or again, you can edge paint or edge highlight if you feel like it. So I'm just going to continue having barely any paint on my dry brush and do all the rest of the pieces. So I will show you what that looks like after I'm done. So that is all of the silver now completed. I'm going to move on to Caliban Green. The Caliban Green will be applied to places in the armor, and the reason I have left this separate is so you can now see, this is actually the top front, but I want to be able to get into the parts under here, because you can't see these great, which just means I don't have to go into a whole lot of detail, but you can see them, so I don't want them to just remain black. I don't want them to be silver, or, wayward dry brushed silver at least. So I'm just cleaning up in here, and then I'll come back, I'll add a wash. I may not even, maybe I'll do like a quick dry brush. Oh, speaking of wayward dry brush. Yeah, anyways, probably not going to do a whole lot of detail in here. I just want to make sure that the inside here, as well as the from the side, you can see is green. So that is that. But more importantly, the whole top piece is going to get a green, obviously. And also, I'm going to switch to a different brush here in a second. When you go to paint these, you're going to paint this, and then maybe get a tinier brush to get inside there, if you can see that. If you can't, don't worry about it. It's not going to really stir up that much. But I'll wash this off real quick. And then the other portion that we're going to be base coating with Caliban Green is things like this orb, as well as like the 763, maybe 764. I'm not actually sure. I didn't count, but it is a lot. All of these orbs, they're not going to end up Caliban Green, but I do want to give them a nice solid base coat. And since Caliban Green, even though it is a thin base coat, or at least seems to be, it is still a base, so that building the Warpstone Glow and Moot Green on top of that will be easier. So all the way down into the ridges down here. Try not to hit any of the completed silver. If you do, oh well. I mean, you can go back and fix it, obviously, but it's really not the end of the world. And if you wanted to, at the very end, you could always put some glaze of Warpstone Glow over these, as if it's emanating or radiating some green. All right. The other things that are going to get is this here, this whole piece that I already started painting and then realized I hadn't recorded this section. This is going to be all green. And then let me go to the big model here, or the majority. So, like I was saying, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 763. But anyways, maybe 800. Just pull random numbers out. But the other thing on this model, I'll get on with it, don't worry, are these arm supports. So silver in here, but then this whole support is going to be green. So we will paint that as well. Now, I think on the original model I have, I stopped here because, and I'm going to do that again here. I don't know. I don't know why I did it, but it's almost for like consistency's sake. Maybe I'll stop here again. I don't know. But the idea is you stop here and then I made this silver and then the little orb comes in and it's green. But if, I don't know, I almost kind of want to go up the arm. Whatever. I'll figure it out. I'll let you know how it looks. But point is, don't forget those. And then, of course, again, on the bottom of the model, you have the one giant orb, which is going to be positioned directly above the gun. Once that gets glued in, so you're going to want to make sure you paint this now. And that's why I left this this piece not glued in. But then every single one of these as well. Takes a long time, and then, you know, it's just only the base coat. Then we're going to add more colors later to this, but it looks great when it's done. And you'll see that. Oh, and of course, whichever head you chose, that's going to be painted Caliban Green as well. The orb as well as the entire armor plate of the front. But don't get back to the neck. Oops. Don't get back to the neck where we finished up the silver there. This is just going to go, I only go to here. And I'll leave the rest. If I can get it, there we go. Anyways, I'll leave the rest behind it silver, but the it's almost like just the face covering gets done in that green. So, finished Caliban Green, show you what it looks like. So something I forgot to mention is that the Caliban Green step is going to feel like it's the longest step so far, and that's because it takes about 6.5 years to finish. The reason for that is I have no idea why, but even though Caliban Green is a base color and should have a nice thick coat when it goes on, even when thinned down, it should still be pretty good in its coverage. For some reason, the silver and the black still end up showing through until about coat, I don't know, 6 or 7, it seems like. Now that could be the particular pot of paint that I have. It could also just be how thin down it is. I don't know. But overall, it takes a while. Now, it's going to seem like it takes a while until you get to the part which is after the Nuln Oil shade that I'm going to start applying in the highlighting of everything. So now that you had done, you know, you've made everything nice and green, you're going to go and highlight all the edges. And then that portion will take pretty much forever. So when I do the Nuln Oil highlights, or Nuln Oil shade and recess, I like to put them into the symbols that are etched into the armor here, as well as any of your typical cracks and crevices that might be on any model. And then I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. You probably can, but let me make sure you can. How about that? I'm gonna move my thumb. Don't want to have a white scars thing going on again. So when you put on the Nuln Oil, you might hit the edges a little bit, which is fine. You can always edge highlight over that, or since it's such a deep, it's a deep crevice, you can actually wipe away and get a nice clean look. So continue on doing all of these sections that are in green. These green orbs don't need to be done, but you know, make sure you hit the spots in between and any of the where is it? There you go. Well, apparently that orb needed to be highlighted, but the spot, the little recesses, as like I said, with pretty much every single model. And then we're going to go back and darken these lines down, same way that we did the other ones, and then, you know, wipe away any excess. If you do see that the Nuln Oil is changing the color of the paint, make sure you clean up. So I'm going to go shade everything, including the arms, including the weapons, and all that fun stuff, and then we will start edge highlighting. Now with the Nuln Oil in place, it is time to go and do some Warpstone Glow highlighting. So we'll do an edge highlight on all of the sharpest edges here, which is very simple to do. And what I like to do is use up a good amount of the paint that is on your brush on getting all of these edges that are really easy to do. Then once you think you have just a little bit left. This circle, just, you know, almost, you're going to do that same edge highlight. So you're going to be dragging it just along the fine edges of it, but this way you run less risk of dropping a bunch of paint down into the silver. So, and then your brush at this point should be bio dry. I don't know why. I don't know why. Ask my friends. They don't know why either. So you go back, get a little bit more, and then once again, go and do the easier portions. And once it's drying out a little bit, come back and get the rest. So that is the edge highlight portion. Now we're also going to put this color down into the orbs. And the way we're going to do that is get rid of whatever that chunk of paint was. I'm not going to go all the way down to where the silver meets the orb, but I am going to go pretty close and going to try and drag the paint up so that if there's any darker color, it stays towards the bottom, because we're going to be doing, you know, a lighter green here at the top again later. All of this you can use once we've done all of the highlights, or all of the like the glowing orb type effects. If you feel so inclined, which I do, you can use a little bit of Warpstone Glow to tie all the colors together, or, and this is something I just tried recently, and it seemed to work out okay. There is another glaze called Lamenters Yellow. There it is. I use that, and because I do like to do the final, like the final, what is it, the little dot that you do in the center to try and like make a focal point of the orb. Watered down, diluted down, you know, lamy medium down, but it still is such a sharp contrast to the Moot Green that putting that Lamenters Yellow glaze over the whole thing then gives the entire effect a little bit of, it softens the hard yellow of the area yellow, and it also does, you know, a good job of tying all of the colors together. You could also use Green Khaki, which is like a technical highlight edge paint, or whatever they want to call it. Don't worry. At some point, I'll have finished all of these highlights of Warpstone Glow, and then I can explain all of that again, because I will have forgotten what I actually said in an earlier segment. So let me go and finish all of these fun edge highlights here. Oh, you know what? I'm going to rename my channel to the Let Me Also channel. So this part here, we're going to try and do as clean of a edge highlight on this as possible. If you do, let's say you are coming at it this way and you go like that, and you paint the entire, let's just do that. Let's just, woo, yeah, yeah. Not tired, you're tired. So let's just say you did that accidentally. So this is where I'm going to show you, you know, let it dry, unless there's a ton of paint on there, then try to pull as much off as you can. Then go back with the, since we didn't shade this outer portion, any Caliban Green you put on here will dry the same color. So go back, make a nice clean line. You can actually make that line between the two really, really thin. Clean up here a little bit. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, yeah, but what about all that warpstone that's now in the crevice? Well, you could use a little bit of thinned down Abaddon Black and go back in there and just cover that right back up. You could also use a couple coats of Nuln Oil, but you may need more than you want to use, and overall just a little bit of thinned down Abaddon Black works just fine. And then next time, remind yourself, I need to slow down and go slower, be more careful. So I will do the highlights on basically everything, and then probably be back in a week. So the highlighting stage is now complete as far as the Warpstone Glow highlights go. Luckily, I started this in 2002, so I have just recently finished the last of that, highlights there. So now we're going to go back with some Moot Green. Moot Green is going to be used as an edge highlight on just the very edges. Well, obviously it's going to be used on the edges as an edge highlight, but probably just the corners. Rather than going on this entire curve, I'm just going to go up near the top, right? Instead of the entire length, I'm just going to go right there at the end. Again, not the entire curve, but at the top. Now here, it's a really short section, so I'm just going to do the whole thing. So just like that, and it is just to give that, that highlight a little more kick. And again, you can do this anywhere as far as this highlight is concerned. Maybe even go up a little bit. So there you go. So there's a couple, right? There's a lot of them to do. I mean, I'd say that anything that has this, whoop, these things are like my least favorite of all. Just because they're not even that hard. It's just, there's just so many of them. And the worst part is they're so blurry when you try to see them, you know, like on a camera maybe, but mostly my eyes, I'm just constantly zooming in and out. I can't see that all. Anyways. Now, to do the orbs, you see the orb has a nice moot green glow. Nope, not yet. I'm gonna make one. May have only gotten a few hours of sleep last night, we'll see. So the moot green is gonna be placed into the center. And what I like to do to start is I'll make like an X across the top here, because I don't want to go down as far as the Warpstone Glow went. And I want to make sure that I'm pulling up towards the center again, because I want the paint to be pulled mainly at the top center. And then, like I said, we can go back and add a glaze later on to help tie all the colors together. Let me move this over here. To help tie all the colors together. But the better you do your initial gradient, the better. So I've watered this down. You can use Lamium medium. You can use whatever you normally use to thin down your paints. And the reason you would use something like Lamium medium versus a water is I've heard it becomes very chalky. I've never actually used Lamium medium to make it less chalky, but that's what I hear. So you can already see when it's wet, it looks great. Like if I could just keep that look, it would be, I'd be happy. But it doesn't stay that way. It dries out a little bit, and what's going to happen is you're going to see little spots around it that are going to look, well, like you're going to see more of that Warpstone Glow through it. So what I'll do in the meantime is go back and, you know, do some edge highlights again. Just the corners, just the corners. If you sing a little song, it makes it seem like it's not taking 6.5 hours. You know, but if you do take a long time on any of these steps, the nice part is typically means it's lit. You're being very complete about it, and it's going to look pretty good, especially when the further you get away from it. You know, like, oh man, those corners really pop. I can't even tell that they're kind of, you know, too fat and too thin in some areas. Anyways, so now I'm going to look, and the orb is not quite dry to the point of where I'd be happy. So what will happen, I don't know if maybe I'll mess it up on purpose, is if it's still too wet and you go back to paint and see, oh, maybe I did. Can you see that? As you pull the paint across, you create like a divot up here because the paint was still really wet at the very top. Now, if that happens, now I'm actually trying to make it happen so I can see if I can fix it. Okay, so did that work? Can you see that? You can't really see it, but you can kind of see what I'm talking about. But basically what happens is the paint in the center, because it was still the most liquidy state and the rest of it started to dry around it. So as I went back and crossed over, it pulled the paint away. If that happens, what I like to do is go back and basically try and mess it up intentionally by going back with just a clean, wet, not super wet, but just damp brush. And I want to soften the edges of where the accident happened, I'll say. So, because I don't want a hard transition. I can always come back and add more paint to this moot green part later. But if it, you know, at a microscopic level, basically, if you've got, this is the moot green here, and as you pulled your brush over, you took the layer that was here that was too wet and you took it away. Well, now you have, you know, paint is an additive process. So you've taken this part away. So when you go back with your wet brush, you're trying to smooth this edge down so that it meets up just better with the existing one. So what I'll do is I'll leave this and I'll let it fully dry, and I'll come back and then I'll try to fix it to show you what I'm talking about. In the meantime, since I'm waiting for it to dry, I'll keep working on the rest of the highlights and come back to you. So here's roughly what the Moot Green looks like once it is all in place. The carapace piece, I chose to do the edges on like an outward facing piece, if you will, like something that is a hard edge on the outsides, but anything that is on the interior, this decoration here, or even like the pieces around the circles here, I did a full, instead of just doing, you know, the outer edge and the outer edge and the outer edge and the outer edge, I did the entire line. So just because I wanted a little bit of coverage there. There's the face with the little eye looking at you. These what is it? These pretend crystals down here, by the way, are actually just sprues that I cut off the sprue and kind of chop off little pieces of the edges and then paint them the exact same way I'm painting everything else. Caliban Green, Warpstone Glow, Moot Green, Uriel Yellow, and it's just to add a little bit of flavor to the base. I only do that on the bigger models that have the bigger bases. I actually did it on all of my warriors, and then I wished I hadn't, because I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to do this for the whole army, and then I just decided to be lazy and never did it again, except for the Wraith Stalker, or the Canoptek Wraith here. The arms, you notice I didn't do any highlighting on the actual arm. I just did it on what I consider to be the outside and the outside. I left the entire middle blank, mainly just because I didn't feel like doing it all. But it looks pretty good to me. If you come back and it's going to look like this if you do too many highlights, and I want it to be more subtle than that. And again, also kind of lazy and don't feel like doing it all. Here's the trans-dimensional beam, which will hang from underneath the weapon. Same thing. Ball is in Moot Green right now. The center here, I tried to do, you know, kind of thin line, and brush got a little heavy, so I might go back actually and do a little bit of watered down Warpstone Glow just on the very outer edges like this, just to darken it down slightly so that the line in the middle is a little more fine. Anyways, and then let me show you then. So let me focus. There we go. Can't quite see it now because I covered it up a little bit, you know, because I forgot I was going to do this. But the mistake that I made earlier, I did one coat so far of a watered down Moot Green instead of a thick coat to try and cover it all. And now I'm going to come back with, again, a very watered down coat. It will go on as if I'm just painting on water, and I can kind of feather down a little bit into the closer to the base. I still want that Warpstone Glow there. I don't want to cover it up completely. I just want a softer transition, and I can do, if you want, you can do a Warpstone Glow up from the bottom, kind of like I was showing you with the trans-dimensional beam a second ago. But the main point of this is to show you, then I come back here and get back in focus. Just go over the top again with that thin coat. You can dab it a little bit, and you don't want to try to cover the entire dark piece in one go, because what's going to happen is it's going to start just making you angry, and because it's not going to work. And then eventually you're going to buy a whole pot of Moot Green and throw it in there, and it'll ruin your whole model. And then, you know, you will have spent all this time, and it won't come out, and you'll blame me, and I'll say, well, come on, man, it can't be my fault. I don't even know if you watched my video. Point is, thin coats, like Duncan says. So anyways, it's good advice. Take it. So anyways, I'm going to come back here and make sure that that gets all finalized. And then I think we are good to glue the whole Wraith together and maybe do some basing. There's a little bit of Uriel Yellow and some glazing to be done, but I mean, once you get past the Warpstone Glow and the Moot Green, I mean, the bulk of the entire model, like it's interesting. You know, you have this whole model, which, let me show you the other one, by the way. I don't know what happened here. So this is my first Wraith, and I don't know if you can see this or not, but the greens are, well, in my mind, the greens are completely different colors. I don't have anything but Caliban Green, but apparently that's how this one came out, and this is how this one came out. But that's fine, you know, I don't mind. I'm not gonna get angry about it, maybe. But anyways, so here's what it's gonna look like finished, just with a slightly different pose and with the whip coils, obviously. So the majority of this model is, you know, it's like dry brush. There's not a whole lot of steps. There's dry brush the silver, there is put the Caliban Green on, there's highlight the green with a couple of colors, and then there's just tiny little work, like a little bit of Retributor Armor, a little bit of maybe Uriel Yellow, and then some glaze. But overall, like, this is basically done once we glue it together. So I'm looking to get that out tonight, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so now the model is glued together. At least these pieces are. I took a couple steps, or I did a couple things while off camera here. They are both they're basically on all these arms. In fact, I'm gonna go back and clean this up because that's the kind of stuff that I do on this show, is I don't plan ahead. All right, so it equates or boils down to painting these pipes in with a little bit of black, or hoses, or whatever they are. If you felt like it, you could probably do a little bit of like, what do they call it? Like a caution look, where it's yellow and black. But since these are Necrons and not by human design, who knows? I doubt they would need to have any sort of, like, you know, heads up tape or anything like that. But I think it would look cool. I'm just not going to do it. Do I have my example of the other thing? I do. Let me show you. So on the other day, I also was thinking, hey, you know what would be fun? Is if I made one of these arms really complicated. So I did it in a two-tone, like, silver. This side is black with Dark Reaper, and then the green with the Moot Green highlights. This side is actually like a Leadbelcher on that black highlight. So I thought, man, that would look really good. And then I also thought, that's going to take a really long time. I don't feel like doing that. So anyways, the other step that I took was I just added a bit of and I've been saying Uriel Yellow, I mean to say Flash Gitz Yellow back here, and you can barely see it. But yeah, black on these hoses, and then obviously the gold on all of these pieces. So that's a very quick step. I'm not going to make a whole dedicated video to that, or a whole segment, whatever you call it. So the next step, and what is essentially the final step, is to paint all these orbs in the final color here, which is the Flash Gitz Yellow. Now, as you see my brush, this is not Flash Gitz Yellow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down a little bit of paint in here at the very edges that I'm expecting the yellow to go in, because what I want to do is I want to have a nice smooth gradient. So I'm going to get now my Flash Gitz Yellow, and I will pop this down in the center here, and I want to basically blend the two colors together so that there's not like a hard transition between the two. And you can do this with the Warpstone Glow to Moot Green, the Caliban Green up to Warpstone Glow. You could do this with all of your colors. It would just take a really long time, but I can tell you, I've seen some people do some extremely cool looking stuff with it. So it's up to you. But this is what I'm going to do with this. Go back a little more yellow. You can see it's because I had the green on there first, it's kind of overpowering the yellow, which is fine. Yellow goes back down in the center again. Now what I'm effectively doing is blending the Moot Green, which was blended into the Flash Gitz Yellow, and then blending the mixture of those two colors in with pure Flash Gitz Yellow again. So when we're done with this, the goal is to have, a nice, it's not going to be seamless, but hopefully a nice transition from the green up to the yellow, so that it's not just super duper harsh. So I'm going to let it dry and see what it looks like. I'm going to show you the weapon head wherever it went. So this is that same idea. Let me move this so it can focus better. This is that same idea here, just basically taking it from the green up to a Moot Green and then into a yellow. You can see at the top it has that same kind of chalky, which is because I use water to thin my paints when I'm doing gradients. But I'm just going to go back and fill in that area pulling up towards the center because that's where I want the brightest point. If you were painting down this way, you might get all the buildup is going to be lower down, and I want all the buildup or the strongest yellow to be at the very center here. So just go back and fix this. Up, do do do, do do do, do. I don't have music for this section, but maybe I should. You let me know if you think that'd be a good idea. There's no royalties on it. It's whoa. It is getting late. No royalties on that music. If you wanna use that, go ahead. So, anyways, let that dry. Go back and fix it. But you can see it makes a nice little blend all the way up to the top. I also put a little bit of yellow in here, and I should be using a thinner brush, but apparently I'm brave right now. So, oh, that thumb thing again going. So there you go. That's the weapon basically done. Now if this creates too harsh of a transition and you don't like what it looks like, grab some Warpstone Glow. That will dull it down to a green. Or, like I said, Lamenters Yellow is another glaze that would work for that too. So I am going to go and do all of these orbs and glue everything together. I'm going to put some Astrogranite down for the base, and then I will dry brush with Praxeti White, just like I've done on all my other Necrons, and then we will have a completed model. So, see you on the other side. So the final step is going to be adding a little bit of basic material. Actually, the final step is going to be cleaning up that yellow. I don't know when that happened. All right, so the second to last step is going to be adding some texture to the base, and I'm using Astrogranite as I do with all of my Necrons, and basically just glob a little bit on around further away from the model. And then I'm using a paint stirrer stick, but you can use just about anything, provided you have some sort of control of it. And then I like to go back then later with a paintbrush, an old one, and push it up near the model so that it's covered. I know some people will do bases before and make them look really, really, really nice. The only thing I don't like about that is I used to do that with some of my Tyranids. And I actually have an example right here as I reach way over there. So I made this, I don't remember what it's called. It's one of my earlier ones. And I did this this cool effect here where it's basically dropped down a bunch of glue and then you just drip super glue into it. And the super glue forces these little pockets and little bubbles. But then when I go back and glue this guy on top, it just kind of looks like he's standing on top of it. Whereas when I do bases like this and you push the texture up against it, it looks as if the creature is actually pushing this dirt away, you know, as if it's ran through it. And especially considering this part is flat on this side, you want to make it look like or at least I want to make it look like he's slightly in there. Again, you texture this however you've textured. You do your bases how you do, and you know, on some of my stuff I don't even put anything since I don't know what I want to do yet. So I will go around and do that. I'm going to do a dry brush of the Praxeti White. I'm going to clean up that yellow from over here that randomly got in that spot, add some black around the rim, and then we'll be finished. So I will come back with the completed model, some pictures, and a full once around like this really fast so now we can see it, and then we'll be good. I did actually, you know, one last thing is I did end up putting Lamenters Yellow on the all of the orbs to tie the colors together a little bit, and I like how it came out. It's kind of bright, but I'm okay with that. If you don't want the look to be that bright, you would use like the Waywatcher Green glaze, or obviously if you're doing a different scheme altogether, you know, there's other glazes that you can use. But I swear to God, one last thing. I was playing around with the idea of all these glowy things, and I wanted to practice a little bit, so I cut apart some Necron Sprue that I wasn't using, and I did a purple, a red, and a blue. And out of all these three, I think I did practice with the green a little bit, but obviously I've got a lot of green already. I really like how this red looks, but I'm like, man, I wish I need to find a project to do with this purple, because this is it was really simple as far as the colors laying down. It's just like, it's 4 different colors of purple, but it went through really easy. The blue I already do on sometimes when I have like 4 swords or like, you know, gray knights, eventually I'll do a little bit more on them. And the red, while I think it looks good, I don't have anything with them, and I don't know if I ever will. But man, this purple, I gotta figure out something to do that has this kind of a paint scheme. I also want to do eventually some sort of black that isn't just flat. I want to figure out how to do something with that just to make it look like an obsidian blade or something. Anyways, let me finish the model at hand before I plan my next project. Do not remember if I mentioned it or not, but the last component of the orb highlight was I did end up adding a little bit of the Lamenters Yellow in to tie the colors together. And as you can see, on this side is Lamenters Yellow, and the other side is the Waywatcher Green, and they're very close, with this side here just being slightly more dull. So I'm happy with how the yellow came out. So realistically, you can go with either one. You're just going to get a little bit brighter versus a little bit darker. So anyways, last step before I just put a black around the base is to do a dry brush of the Praxeti White, as I normally do on my Necrons. So that is, get a little bit of the paint. The paint is a dry paint, so it's already pretty dry. And then go with a light motion over the top just to catch the highest ridges. You can go darker in some areas if you'd like. You can do a circular pattern. You can go in just one way. The sky is the limit when you're working on the ground. So we will then finish this off, and wow, that looks a lot brighter on camera than it does in person. Anyways, so I'm going to finish this up and bump into the camera, refix the camera for the shot, which I've already finished. So anyways, yeah, how are you doing? Good? Yeah, me too. All right, let me finish this up, and then we will go to a couple pictures, maybe a final 360, and my closing arguments before I rest my case. All right. And just like that, we come to the end of another Roshamjoe Paints episode. Thank you for hanging with me. If you made it this far, the Canoptek Wraith will now take a seat over there with the rest of the models I've painted so far on this channel. I'm looking to grow that and add a couple shelves to it later on as I complete more videos and get them out to everybody. The model itself, I really like the model. I think it's cool looking. The paint scheme is simple while not boring. It's tough to paint in my mind simply because of the time that it takes to complete everything. You know, trying to film this adds a little bit of extra time, but overall, even the first one that I painted, I just find that even though it's, you know, green, lighter green, yellow, something along those lines, it still takes a little bit of extra time, I think, because of the amount of tiny little parts and tiny little angles that get done. Overall, though, I am happy with the look. The wet blending on the orbs I was a lot happier with this time. And I think the Lamenters Yellow versus the Waywatcher Green, keeping it a brighter yellow color so it stands out a little bit more than having the Waywatcher Green. I like that touch. So next up, who knows? I am now out of Necrons to paint, although it is the night before the Indominus is released, so maybe I'll have a lot more Necrons for you. We'll see. I will be also painting some Space Marines, some Necrons. I've got a lot of stuff in boxes that needs painting. I could switch over to Age of Sigmar Warhammer stuff. I've got Nighthaunt. I got a lot of models that need a lot of paint. So if you have any preference, let me know. If not, then just wait for the next one to drop, and we'll see you then. All right? Have a good one.